There are certain moments in life when everything shifts. Sometimes it's subtle, like a breeze slipping through the curtain on a quiet afternoon. Other times, it comes like a storm, rearranging everything you thought was in place. For many people, especially those who carry years of silent battles, guilt, and emotional weight, change isn't loud or grand. It happens softly, almost imperceptibly, but it happens. That was the case for Miranda, a woman in her late 30s who had no idea that the most profound transformation of her life would begin not in a therapist's office, not at a retreat, but in her own backyard, staring into the dusk sky. Miranda, like so many others, had spent most of her life taking care of everyone else. She had children to raise, bills to pay, a demanding job to maintain, a household that never quite ran on its own, and dreams that she had shelved years ago, thinking they no longer belonged to her. Each day blurred into the next. Wake up, work, care for others, try to sleep, repeat. Somewhere along the line, she had stopped asking herself how she felt. She stopped checking in with her body, her soul, her hopes. But one evening, after another long day of keeping everything afloat, she sat alone, watching clouds drift across a grey sky, and whispered a question she hadn't dared to voice before. Is there anything left of me in here? That quiet moment, that small flicker of self-awareness, was the start of something new. Miranda didn't know it then, but that single question planted a seed. Not a seed of rebellion, not of dramatic change, but of something far more powerful: reconnection. It all began with a simple conversation. A friend in a casual exchange asked her, "When was the last time you truly listened to yourself?" The question didn't require an answer. It just echoed. And for days, Miranda carried it with her, almost like a stone in her pocket. Every time she tried to brush it aside, it returned, pressing into her thoughts at unexpected moments. Slowly, Miranda began to observe herself differently. She didn't rush past the mirror anymore. Instead, she lingered, not to criticize what she saw, but to ask, "Who is this woman looking back at me?" She allowed herself a few extra minutes in the shower, not to multitask in her mind, but to simply feel the warmth on her skin. She started walking in the late afternoons without headphones or distractions, letting her mind roam freely for the first time in years. These weren't dramatic changes. They were gentle, small, almost fragile, but they mattered. There was one evening when she said no to a request she would have automatically said yes to in the past, and that moment, insignificant to others, felt monumental to her. It wasn't about being rude. It wasn't about putting up walls. It was about drawing a boundary where there had been none before. And in that no, she discovered a yes to herself. What made Miranda's process so real and so relatable was its imperfection. There were days she slipped into old habits, days she doubted everything, days she questioned if she was being selfish for wanting time alone, for needing space, for craving more than just survival. And yet, those doubts didn't erase the progress. They were part of it. Healing, as she learned, doesn't arrive like a bright light that erases all darkness. It's more like a sunrise, slow, subtle, and filled with layers. As Miranda began to reconnect with herself, something beautiful unfolded. She realized she didn't need to erase the woman she had been. She only needed to honor her, the one who carried burdens in silence, the one who gave endlessly, the one who endured heartbreak, disappointment, exhaustion, and kept going. That woman wasn't weak. She was the foundation. And now, Miranda was building on that foundation with care, with choice, with presence. And maybe you, reading this right now, recognize something in her story. Maybe you've been moving through your days on autopilot, wondering why you feel so distant from yourself. Maybe you've been the strong one for too long, the dependable, tireless, ever-capable person who silently puts everyone first. And maybe, like Miranda, you've reached a point where you're starting to feel the quiet tug of your own voice calling you back. Let this be your permission to listen. There's no perfect time to start reclaiming your sense of self. You don't need to wait for a breakdown or a breakthrough. You don't need to justify it to anyone. Whether you're 33, 49, or 61, your inner world matters. Your desires matter. And yes, your exhaustion matters too. You've earned the right to pause, to breathe, to ask yourself the kinds of questions that don't always have easy answers. What Miranda discovered, and what many of us can too, is that healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. It's about picking up the threads of your own story and weaving something that feels whole, even with the knots, even with the tears. And yes, it's hard, especially when life keeps demanding more of you. But healing doesn't require a sabbatical. It doesn't demand perfection. It only asks for attention, for honesty, for small acts of grace toward yourself, like sitting in silence, taking a walk alone, crying without guilt, laughing without explanation, or simply being still. These moments become the soil where something real can grow. You see, Miranda's transformation didn't happen in a weekend. It unfolded over time, like a flower learning to bloom again after a long winter. She didn't follow a script or check off a list of self-help tasks. She followed her gut. She made space. She listened. And slowly, gently, she came home to herself. So now the question turns to you. When was the last time you truly felt like yourself? Not the version others expect, but the one that quietly whispers beneath it all. Maybe today is the day you begin to listen. Maybe this moment right here, right now is your beginning. As the days rolled on, something inside Miranda began to shift in a way that even she couldn't fully explain. It wasn't loud or explosive. It didn't involve grand gestures or dramatic announcements. It was more like water tracing a new path through the soil after years of flowing the same way. She began to catch herself noticing things she had ignored for so long. The way sunlight touched her kitchen window in the morning, the texture of her child's laughter, the ache in her shoulders that had quietly existed for years without a name. It was as if her senses had returned, not suddenly, but gradually. And each return brought with it a quiet kind of grief, because for all that she was beginning to feel again, the joy, the gratitude, the awareness, there was also sorrow. Sorrow for the years she had been disconnected, for the birthdays she had smiled through but not really felt, for the seasons that passed while she was stuck in survival mode, for all the times she had put herself last on her own list, believing that it was noble, or necessary, or just the way things had to be. This grief didn't come to punish her. It came to be witnessed, and Miranda for the first time let herself feel it, fully, without rushing it away, without telling herself she was being dramatic. She cried in her car one afternoon, not because anything had happened that day, but because everything had happened, and she had never had space to process any of it. She cried in a way she hadn't since she was 19, raw, shaking, unfiltered. And then, after that wave passed, she didn't feel broken. She felt alive. That was the moment she realized something powerful. Emotions don't make us weak. Suppressing them does. Pretending to be fine is exhausting. Carrying on with a brave face while your heart is aching, that's not strength. That's self-abandonment in disguise. And Miranda had done it for so long that she forgot what true strength even looked like. It wasn't holding everything together at the expense of her own well-being. It was choosing to sit with her pain, to acknowledge her limits, and to stop pretending she was okay when she wasn't. And slowly, something else began to emerge. Anger. Not the kind that lashes out, but the kind that bubbles up when you realize how much of yourself you've sacrificed, how many boundaries you allowed to be crossed, how many moments you lost trying to meet other people's expectations. Miranda didn't want to live like that anymore. She didn't want to be the woman who was admired for how much she could endure. She wanted to be respected for how well she could protect her peace. So she started making different choices. She let go of friendships that only took from her. She stopped over-explaining her needs to people who didn't listen. She began spending time with herself, not as a punishment, but as a reward. She journaled. She sat in silence. She read books not because they were popular or productive, but because they made her feel something. And maybe most importantly, she started speaking more kindly to herself. The voice inside her head, once sharp, critical, relentless, softened. It began to say things like, "You're allowed to rest," or "You did enough today," or simply, "I'm proud of you." For Miranda, that inner shift changed everything. She didn't need the world to applaud her. She wasn't doing it for approval anymore. She was doing it because she had spent too many years living like a guest in her own body, and she was ready to come home. And if you're still watching this, still following her story, maybe because you see your reflection in it, I want you to take a deep breath right now, seriously. In through the nose, out through the mouth, just breathe. This isn't just Miranda's story. It's a path that belongs to many people who've spent more time surviving than actually living. People who learned to be everything for everyone and forgot how to be there for themselves. Maybe you're one of them, and maybe, just maybe, it's time to start your own quiet rebellion. But here's the thing, you don't have to do it alone. This space, this channel, this corner of the internet, it exists for you. Not to flood you with noise or tell you to hustle harder, but to offer moments like this, where someone finally says, hey, your story matters. And more than that, your healing matters. So if this touched something in you, something raw or tender or real, I want to invite you to stay close, not because I need numbers or clicks or comments, but because you deserve to walk this journey feeling seen. And if you feel safe here, if you feel like this space helps you come back to yourself, then maybe hit that subscribe button, not as a favor to me, but as a commitment to you. A small gesture that says, yes, I want more of this in my life. And while you're at it, I have a little request. If this video stirred something in your heart, would you tell me? Not in a formal, polished comment, but just as you are. Tell me how you're doing. What part of the story felt like yours? What moment made you pause? It can be a sentence, a feeling, even just a word, because the more we speak our truths, however quietly, the more we help others find theirs. So, leave your footprints here. I'll read every one of them. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, like someone who's always strong, always giving, always tired, maybe share this with them. Not as advice, not as a fix, but as a whisper. You're not alone. And it's okay to come back to yourself, because that's what this is about in the end. Not about becoming better, not about chasing more, but about remembering who we've always been beneath all the noise, and giving that person space to breathe again. There's something strange that happens when you start choosing yourself. At first it feels selfish, almost like a betrayal to the version of you who was always available, always saying yes, always trying to make sure everyone else was okay. You begin to question whether you're doing the right thing. People might even push back, not because you're wrong, but because your boundaries start interrupting the benefits they used to enjoy. But if you can make it past that first stretch, the discomfort, the guilt, the awkward silences, you'll discover something precious. Peace. For Miranda, peace didn't arrive all at once. It came in pieces, in quiet mornings where she didn't reach for her phone first, in saying no without giving a reason, in noticing that she could sit alone at a cafe and not feel like she had to fill the silence with productivity. It came in trusting her gut, even when others didn't understand. It came in soft ways, like choosing clothes that felt good on her skin, rather than ones that fit someone else's idea of beauty. And one morning, without realizing it, Miranda looked in the mirror and didn't flinch. She wasn't chasing perfection anymore. She wasn't fixing herself. She was meeting herself as she was, where she was, and that version, she was enough. One afternoon, her daughter came into the room, holding a drawing. Miranda looked up and really saw her. Not just the picture, not just the moment, but the wholeness of her. She saw the child she was raising with so much love and effort, but more than that, she saw herself reflected in those wide eyes. A mother who had fought silently, healed quietly, and was learning to live fully. And that realization hit her like the warmth of the sun. When you choose yourself, you teach others to do the same, especially the ones watching you closely. That's when Miranda understood something vital. Healing isn't a destination. It's a way of being. You don't graduate from it. You live it day by day, decision by decision. Sometimes you'll still fall back into old patterns, the overgiving, the apologizing for your needs, the feeling like you have to earn your place in the world. That's okay. It doesn't mean you're failing. It just means you're human. And healing, it's not linear. Some days it feels like progress. Others feel like unraveling. But both are part of the path. As her life slowly shifted, so did her circle. People who loved her only when she was small and self-sacrificing started to drift away. But in their place came something better. Connections rooted in truth, not transaction. Friends who celebrated her no as much as her yes. Conversations that didn't drain her but nourished her. And a new inner voice that sounded less like pressure and more like permission. Miranda began walking differently. Not with arrogance, but with grounding. Not to prove anything, but simply because her feet finally belonged on the earth. She laughed more. She didn't need an excuse. She forgave herself, not because she deserved punishment, but because she realized she never did. And sometimes, on a quiet night, she would sit on her porch, breathe in the air, and whisper to herself, "We made it." And maybe you're wondering, where does this story go next? What happens to Miranda? Does she find perfect balance? A fairy tale ending? Here's the truth. She keeps going. Like all of us. She has good days. She has hard days. She still doubts herself sometimes. But now she knows how to return home to her breath, to her body, to her truth. That's the real ending. Not perfection, but presence. And maybe that's what you need too. So if you're still here, really here, I want to say something from my heart. Thank you for giving this story time to unfold, for not rushing through it like we're so often taught to do, and for allowing yourself to feel something real, even if it was uncomfortable, even if it cracked you open a little. Before we close this chapter, I want to invite you one more time, gently, warmly, to join this space if you haven't yet, not as a follower, but as a fellow traveler. Someone who understands that stories like Miranda's aren't fiction. They're mirrors, they're reminders, they're the quiet truths we tuck away inside us, hoping one day someone else will say, "I've felt that too." So if this story met you somewhere tender, if it held your hand while you were remembering your own strength, consider clicking that subscribe button, not just to stay connected, but to honor your own journey, to say to yourself, "I want to keep choosing me," because this space isn't about content, it's about connection. It's about building a small, quiet revolution where people feel safe to be messy, healing, and beautifully human. And as we close, let me leave you with this. Wherever you are on your path, just beginning somewhere in the middle, or returning after a long detour, you're not too late. You're not behind. You're not broken. You are, in fact, incredibly brave. And I'm glad you're here.